Hello, this is Kristin Baver, and you're listening to the FSF podcast.
The show where R2-D2 may be the ultimate ride or die droid, but he's still going to snitch on us for being bad podcasters.
Our show is brought to you by our charity sponsor, the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund, which supports the Wish Upon a Teen Foundation that helps out sick kids when they need it most. And just imagine the comfort you'll give Red Shirt Crewman number K10B. She'll know that when she puts on the red shirt and writes about the good, bad, and the Empire, that she didn't leave her family destitute and without hope, because Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund has her back, and what's left of her Arabesh stamped blog.
All right, guys, our guest today is an author and associate editor of StarWars.com, not only with timely articles and reviews of really cool Star Wars content, but she's also interviewed other members of the Star Wars universe and, Lucasfilms and all those great, wonderful things. So there should be two things that are obvious about this introduction. Number one, our guest is probably used to being on the other side of the microphone or the other side of the interview. And number two, I just wanted to see how many times I could say Star Wars in an introduction. And so far we're at 4. Okay, Star Wars, that's 5. Anyway, let's all take a moment to welcome Kristin Baver to the FSF podcast. Welcome to the show, Kristin.
Thank you for having me. That was a great introduction. Star Wars. 6. Star Wars.
Aww. Yeah, we're always thrilled to be able to talk with somebody who's out doing the things in the Star Wars world.
Doing the nerds work.
People who are actually doing the real work. We're just sitting here giggling. Wouldn't it be cool to talk to them?
Today's drinking game is brought to you by Star Wars.
Exactly.
Oh man, is it as bad as the bottom game?
Bottom. But yeah, see what I did there? But we're always happy to talk with somebody who's out in the Star Wars universe and has roots in the fandom. And it always makes for a fun conversation because I'm a massive Star Wars fan and I just bring these two along for fun. But one thing I always want to know about our Star Wars themed guests is, what was your entry point into the Star Wars universe and what keeps you coming back?
That's a great question. So my entry point is probably a very similar story to all three of you and most people listening or watching. When I was a kid, I got action figures for Christmas one year, and they were Buff Chewbacca from Power of the Force and his friend R2-D2. And I cannot now recall, because I didn't know how often I would be asked about this specific moment in time in my life. I cannot now recall if I got the action figures first and then watched the films, or if I had seen some of the films and then also got the action figures, because it was all kind of happening in that same time and space. But I do distinctly remember getting those action figures because little did I know that was about to start a lifelong and very expensive habit of acquiring more Star Wars action figures. But also just getting that entry point of seeing the films for the first time. This was just a hair before the special editions. We had them on VHS. We watched them on the Sci-Fi Channel when they were available on the Sci-Fi Channel. I remember, even though we had them on VHS, if it would come on the Sci-Fi Channel, I would just kind of like stop everything else I was doing and watch, from that point forward. They were those movies, in my house growing up. And what I didn't know at the time was that my parents and my sister, who's 5 years older than me, had already entered that universe, and I was the latecomer as the youngest. My sister had the vintage Yoda puppet from when Empire Strikes Back came out. I believe my dad had Splinter of the Mind's Eye in paperback from, when that originally came out,
nice.
Pre-Empire Strikes Back. And my mom had the LP version of the soundtrack to A New Hope. So, all three of them, they had other items too, but like, if I had to pinpoint, one thing that made me realize as a child, oh, this thing I feel like I just discovered and is brand new and is, it's actually 20 years old, but it's fine, is something that all three of you love too, separately. That's so weird. But to answer the second part of your question, so that's kind of the basis of that love. And I remember going to see the special editions in the theater and feeling just so elated that I could finally see these movies that I loved, on the big screen as intended. And, and then shortly thereafter, we got new Star Wars movies. And I was like, this is the best time. What? But I think what keeps me coming back, because there's certainly been times in my life where, post prequels, I thought, oh, okay, well, that was fun. Now I'm a little bit older, I'm going to do more serious things. And right, see how that worked out? And, you know, kind of moved off from it, moved, you know, away to other fandoms, interests, you know, whatnot. But it never really left me. And so when Force Awakens came out and all of a sudden we had new action figures and new stories and new characters to love, I always kind of describe it as that moment in Ratatouille where I was like sitting in the theater watching Force Awakens, you know, just the Star Wars came up on screen, and it's like all of a sudden I'm 10 years old again and I'm sitting in that theater and I'm just so excited to be there. And I couldn't believe how lucky I was that to get to experience an all new Star Wars story again, because I thought that time was over and I thought, you know, all of those things had passed me by. So I think, you know, part of what keeps me coming back, or as part of it now, post, you know, that resurgence of love for it in 2015 is, you know, that we do have this embarrassment of riches of new storytelling coming out of Star Wars in books and comics, in series form, you know, for a number of years in, you know, that Christmas time, what I always think of as the Christmas time movie, you know, but the December release of a new Star Wars film for 5 years in a row, you know, just so lucky. Well, Solo came out in May, actually. Now I'm fact checking myself as I'm talking. not every December for 5 years, but you know what I mean. You know, we had films for a number of years. We have series, we have books, comics. You know, there's just so much really cool Star Wars stuff coming out. But I don't, you know, as I'm talking through it now, I'm not even sure that it's the fact that we have new content, you know, and I don't think it's the fact that we have new content that is what really, you know, keeps me engaged with it as much as it is the quality of those stories and how relatable those characters continue to be and how much I just love being immersed in that galaxy and feeling very confident while I'm watching those things that yes, these things could really happen. These characters could be real people. This all feels, you know, it passes the test for me of, yes, I absolutely have, you know, checked my disbelief at the door. This is entirely real. I get it.
I identify with so much of what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference for me is growing up when I was real little, it was just my mom, my brother, and I, so money was really tight. We didn't have a lot of the toys, but I had a neighbor who's you know, basically got anything and everything he wanted. So I was always over at his house and he had like, you know, the big play sets and everything. And, you know, because this is right around the time where the Return of the Jedi was coming out and all the, you know, the really big cool toys were coming out. And I mean, he had like the indoor play sets and all these different things. And yeah, so I played at his house a lot because I was very, you know, Empire Strikes Back was my entry point. And that has left such an indelible mark on my life moving forward. So a lot of what you just said all kind of resonates with me because every time I go to the theater for a Star Wars movie, doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or indifferent, as soon as the crawl starts.
Oh, that
you know,
first note of the theme song hits and the tears start. Like,
yeah, it gets me. I don't have any tears, but I do have giggles. I may have giggled in a movie theater once or twice when it started off, but that's a whole different story. So
did anyone else have these 6-foot cardboard cutout of Jar Jar?
no.
Oh, okay. Just me?
You know, but I distinctly remember I was a member of the Star Wars fan club around the time of special editions and the prequels, and I remember did you read Star Wars Insider at that time? Did you get it at that point? Because it had like that.
No, I did not.
So it had a catalog in the middle of the magazine, and it would be like, oh, would you like to order some cardboard standees? And I was always like, I would like to do that, but I don't know where to put them in my room. And so I never actually got any of them. But I ordered so many t-shirts from that catalog, and I still have some of them because the other kind of weird magic of that time is, you know, even though Star Wars is, you know, ostensibly for kids first, you know, it's an all ages type of experience. Everything was sized adult men's. So I was like this 10-year-old girl who was shopping from this catalog, and I was like, I guess I'm a men's small. I don't know. And so I would have these enormous Star Wars but now they still fit me, and some of them, still exist and are still in really good shape. And so, like, it's kind of a weird blessing that nothing was sized appropriately for me at the time, because now I still have some of my original T-shirts, and I've actually worn one of them for hosting this week, because it just delights me to no end that this piece of like personal vintage ephemera now can be part of my work wardrobe to go to Lucasfilm.
That's fantastic. I think if I had, because I grew up in a small rural area and, small rural school, and I don't think our library had, Star Wars Insider or anything like that. I didn't know it existed till much later, which is probably a good thing, because the money that I did have as a teenager from working my job would have gone completely to all Star Wars things.
Like your job does now.
You know what? Shush. So I'm not at my actual office right now. I'm visiting some friends out of state. But if I was actually at home in my studio, my office, my whole wall behind me is nothing but Star Wars Funko Pops, and so.
Although I love that even though you're not at home, you still have the Return of the Jedi poster behind you somehow. Like, you're still on brand.
Well, if it was to turn a little bit, there's also the Empire Strikes Back. There's the New Hope poster over there. Couple lightsabers up on the wall. My buddy's a geek too, so it helps.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah, and I love too that, like, you were talking about your entry point into Star Wars, and I don't remember watching Star Wars for the first time. I was so young. My brothers are 10 and 12 years older than me. My parents are Star Wars fans. Like, Star Wars was just a thing. Like, I legitimately do not remember watching the original trilogy for the first time. But when episode 1 came out and my brothers are like, hey, you want to go see this movie with us? I'm like, yes. And I was 8, right? 8, something like that. When did?
Yeah, you're ridiculously young.
99, and I think that is probably the perfect age to experience that movie, because you're like right on the cusp of being exactly the same age as Anakin and really being able to teleport yourself into that position.
And then when you're introduced to Jar Jar as, I guess I would have been 7. When you're introduced to Jar Jar as a 7 or 8-year-old, he's hilarious. Like, that was a good entry point with reviving my love for the fandom with the yay. And then now with the Obi-Wan series, I have a 4-year-old daughter. I look at little Leia with the, oh my gosh, it's my kid. Like, that spunk is what, oh my gosh, yeah. That spunk is what I have to deal with. That is, but then if I can raise my daughter to be like Leia, to then be General Leia, I'm like, yes, we can do this. Like, I love that it doesn't matter where you are in your life, it's still Star Wars.
Also, I love that you positioned it as you were 7 and you like rediscovered your love for it. That feels very much like, when you're 7, you feel like you've lived such a long life already, and you're 7,
right? And I think it was just like it was new and shiny again, and the toys were new, and it was like, hey, this is a thing, this is cool. And yeah, totally. At 7, you think that you've lived so long, though.
Yeah. Well, and that was a really interesting time to be a fan, because I remember the toys came out, unless I'm misremembering, which is entirely possible on this fine Friday. But I believe the toys came out before the film debuted.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
so
yeah.
All these characters, and you were like, who is Padme? Who is Jar Jar? And you had no idea. But you were just like buying them based on the design and hope that you would fall in love with them. And
totally fell in love with Darth Maul before I saw the movie.
That design is next level amazing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Iconic.
Understood.
So I was looking through your list of articles on StarWars.com, which is an impressive list of things that you've talked about, that you've written about. I was personally quite entertained by the Pan Solo article. The idea of making a giant bread solo was just fantastic to me. And then your most recent article about the costume design for Andor, because those costumes were gorgeous. And that is such a cool article. And I know that as an interviewer, you know that the what's your favorites question is not really a great question, and asking what's your favorite is impossible. But if you had to choose a favorite of the articles that you've written, do you have a favorite of your articles, or the one that you're like the most proud of?
I do, but it's kind of a gimme when you think about it in context, I think. And I definitely have like probably like a top list of, their most memorable to me, or their, some of my favorites, either because of the way they came out or the experience of getting to do the interview. But my absolute top favorite article of all of the things I've written for StarWars.com is an article that we did for the 40th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back. And we got to interview George Lucas about Empire. And so that's why, it easily rises to the top of my favorites, both because it's George Lucas. I did not expect to ever get to, necessarily interview him. It was such a great challenge as an interviewer, because I thought, okay, well, he's been talking about this for 45 years. What can we possibly bring to this interview to ask him about that isn't going to bore him, that is really going to, engage and, get some really interesting answers. And I believe there was one question that I asked that he actually, had said, oh, I don't think I've been asked that before. And it was something about, if my memory serves, and my memory might not serve because this was like 2020, but I think
enough.
it was a question about when he knew that Yoda was working, because, if you teleport back to when they're making Empire Strikes Back, no one yet knows that Yoda is going to be such a sensation, and no one knows that, yes, what is essentially a Muppet can carry this extremely heavy part of the story, all about, the Force and how important it is. So I think that was the question, but, that is, my top article, personal favorite article of all the things I've written, just because, I have so many sense memories too, of like doing that interview and then getting done with that interview and thinking, oh, I hope I actually ask good questions, because, sometimes you're just like so in the zone and so focused that you just like, your brain turns off, and then you get back to reality and you're like, glad we recorded that. And I can just look at it later and see what I did there, because I have no memories now. And I'm really just happy too with the way that article turned out. And I was so glad that we got to celebrate Empire, because Empire is my personal favorite movie of all the Star Wars movies. When I was a kid, it was Return of the Jedi. And now as I've gotten older, it's turned into Empire. Is, if I had to only watch one Star Wars movie for the rest of my life, I would pick Empire every single time.
It's because it's a great movie. I love though that your brain does the mind wipe thing too. There have been so many times that we've gotten done with an interview and my husband's like, so how did it go? I'm like, I have no idea.
I think it went good.
Yeah. But I think it's a testament to being super focused on the subject and in the moment. And, so you're trying not to kind of drift off. You're really trying to just be engaged, and make sure that you're asking good follow-up questions. And in order to do that, you have to listen really carefully. And so all of that skill set, for me at least, ends up being at the end of it, I go, well, I hope that was good. And then I listen back to it. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Kathleen, but I will listen back to an interview. This happened a lot actually when I was transcribing for The Art of Star Wars: The High Republic, because we did like 25 different interviews for that or more. And so I would be listening back and I'd be like, oh no, I should have asked them this question. And then literally the next question is that question. But, in my mind, I thought, oh no, I totally forgot to ask them this important thing. But, your brain is wired in a very specific way. And so like my brain was still going in the same pattern of thought that had been going through.
I've done that.
But, once again, and it happens so frequently, I think, where I'm just so plugged into the moment and trying to be plugged into the moment that when I listen back to it, I have almost no memory of some of these questions that I asked. Myself that, oh yes, you did in fact ask the obvious to you follow-up question. Good job, past me.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah, there's been many times where when I've been watching playback of a video of something that we've done, and I'm like, it's almost like, I have no memory of this place.
Yes.
And just very glad that either Kathleen or Nick saved me on something, or that I actually did ask the secondary question the follow-up question that I should have asked, to somebody's response, or I had the appropriate response to something. Because half the time there'll be, the question is out there and they're giving the response, and I'm listening to it and I'm going, oh, that went a different direction. I golly, what did I do? And I've like fast forwarded to, try to, oh, okay. I did okay.
I've had a
We
couple of
landed.
times. I've had a couple of times too, where like I'm thinking about oh man, this is the follow-up question I should ask. And then whoever we're interviewing answers it before I asked it. And I'm like, huh, it must have been the right question then.
There you go.
Yeah, I love that kind of like weird, magical, like hive mind, or it's a Vulcan mind meld.
Mm-hmm.
Some sort where you're in an interview and you're asking questions and then you think, oh man, I've got to segue them into this next bit. And then they say something that so perfectly segues into the next question you ask them. And you're just like, we are on the level today. We are.
Yes. I love that moment.
And speaking of segues,
I should still buy one of those. Do they still make
Did I just do it for you, Nick? Did I segue into the next question you wanted to ask?
I mean, you were segueing into a segue, so it was segue. So we've discussed your entry into Star Wars, and we've also discussed something that is also dear to you. So what was it that has made you to get into the career path of being a writer?
Ooh, all right.
How did you end up in the Star Wars specifically?
So I do believe there is such a thing as luck. It can not only be luck, it is also the result of a tremendous amount of hard work and effort and persistence and patience. But luck and good timing are definitely such a big part of it. But it's interesting because for me, I identified as a writer before I identified as a Star Wars fan, because I discovered how much I enjoyed writing when I was a little kid, about 7 or 8. And I would just, create my own characters and draw them and then create, little storylines for them. I had my own like little comic that I would write about these 2 bears. It was like 4 panels, so they didn't get much done in any of these comics. But, it was a thing that I tried. And I loved the feeling of being so hyper-focused and immersed in a story of my own creation, and just being in that space where you're creating characters. And then I think this is something that a lot of writers can identify with, but you create the characters and you might set out thinking that you know where your story is going to go, and then sometimes you're right in the middle of it and the character takes a left turn and you're like, didn't know we were going over here, but let's see where this leads. And it's almost like there's 2 separate people at play, which sounds a little crazy, but it's like you're the writer, you're steering things, but then your character makes a decision you hadn't foreseen and you just kind of run with it and you see where it takes you. So this is a really long, rambling answer to say that I loved writing when I was a kid. And when I got older, my parents suggested that, if I wanted to be a writer, I might want to study a very practical type of writing so that I could have a job with a 401k and health insurance while I was writing and not just hoping, to get published, which, is a very parental type of response. But I agreed with it. And so I studied professional writing, which was just a number of things. It was business writing, it was PR, it was newspaper journalism, or just journalism in general. But where I fell in love with journalism was in newspapers. And so that was my career for a number of years. And yeah, and it's been a very weird trajectory. Like 5-10 years ago, I didn't know this job could exist. And so I wouldn't have set out determined to do this job because I didn't even know it was an option. But it's been a lot of, trial and error. I worked in newspaper journalism, and then I was starting to feel like, I was getting a little burned out. And also I just wanted to do something a little bit different. And I started just, kind of trying on different things as a freelancer. And I did some magazine journalism and I wrote for some websites, and I kind of, fell into what I think would be considered like entertainment journalism a bit by accident, because I had just rediscovered my love for Star Wars. And I was like, what would happen if I just wrote about the things that I loved? And that was a job. Like, could that be a job? And so I just started doing that. And very luckily then, did start freelancing for StarWars.com first. And then after about 1.5 years to get hired on full time. to work as associate editor for the website. But it's interesting because, that path doesn't make a lot of sense on paper when you look at it. But at the same time, I don't think I could be doing the writing that I'm doing today without that as the trajectory, because I learned so much about good writing and interviewing and leads and everything else in the journalism space that I still apply every single day to everything I'm doing for StarWars.com. And then also, it's just been such a delight for that to come full circle where, when I was a kid and my parents were saying, well, why don't you get a job where you're writing, but then you can write books in your free time. And now have a job where I'm writing and I'm writing books in my free time. And so it's just, it has worked out tremendously well. And I feel so grateful and lucky that, I have gotten to this point. But again, it's perseverance, it's persistence, it's putting in the time. And then it's also just luck of being at the right place at the right time when all of a sudden, you get to do the thing that you maybe didn't even know you always wanted to do. But now that I look back on it, I think, oh no, of course this, if someone had told me, hey, this could be an option, I'd be like, yes, sign me up for that. I want to do that. How do I get to that?
I want that one.
Yeah.
As you were telling your story, I couldn't help but imagine, like you were saying, like almost a different story for yourself. And I was thinking of like small town journalists and how all of a sudden she starts writing about lightsabers and using the Force in a story that has nothing to do with Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it is funny because like, Tim, you were saying, you grew up in a rural area. I grew up in a rural area and you worked in like a small town community, daily newspaper space. And so, when I left that job to move to San Francisco, I had several conversations with people because, I was working a specific beat. And so I had to go to them and say like, hey, I'm not gonna be around anymore. I'm handing you off to this person, finish off whatever stories I had been working on. And I know a couple of them were like, the big city, you're going to San Francisco. Are you going to be okay? It's so far away. So it's been really funny to kind of see that, mentality. And then for some other people, because I was certainly, a little bit daunted by it, not only because of where the job was that was driving that decision, but which is kind of funny and ridiculous. But also I was like, obviously I have to do this thing. Why would I not do this thing? But so some of their concerns like, ooh, are you sure about San Francisco? I was like, don't know. We'll find out when I get there. He's going to be great, I hope. Not totally unfounded.
Well, actually, that was really good segue. See what I did there? Into my next question. So,
and now, a word from our show sponsor, Level Up Sabers. Their link can be found in the show notes.
you mentioned some of your articles that you've written. You talked about the books that you've written, and you have several Star Wars books that are some really cool reference style books. About what's going on in different parts of the Star Wars universe, whether it's about the Skywalker family or it's about the art of the High Republic, which I checked that book out recently. That is fantastic. But they're all been very well reviewed for the way that they've been researched and they've been put together. So kudos to you for that. That's awesome. I think I always say in this day and age of the negative line, if you can get anything over a 4-star rating, you've done something right. But all the books of yours that I looked at had between a 4.8 and a 4.9 rating. So the closer you get to 5, you're pushing perfection there, kiddo. So well done. So my question here for you is, how do you go about picking what the topic is for your reference work? Because you do have such a wide variety of things that you've talked about in your reference books. But then also out of those reference books that you've done, and the topics that you've chosen, which one was the most personal project for you that you did because I liked this, but I also have a lot of interest in this particular topic?
I'm going to start at the end of that question, I think, with my answer.
Fire away.
The one that so far has been most personal to me is a book that isn't out yet, but that we can talk about.
Ooh.
I know. Ooh. Spoilers, not really. It's coming out next year, and it's called Star Wars 100 Objects. And it's the most personal book so far for me because it's a book that I pitched, that I really, really wanted to do, and that really kind of cements my love for a couple different facets of, both writing and Star Wars and prop builders and, telling stories in universe, because it makes it feel like you continue to be immersed in the Star Wars galaxy. So I think that's probably my personal, the one, not my personal favorite, but the one that is most personal for me, because it was something that I was really driven to pursue. But I will say a lot of these books come about through so many different conversations where, I might not have been the one to pitch it, but, someone else within the sphere said, oh, we should have a book like this. Who could do that? And my name got lobbed into it, which is always a little stunning to me when it happens. And, of course, I find out about it because I get approached and they say, hey, do you want to write this book? And this actually happened with Art of Star Wars: The High Republic, where I got the email and it was subject line, The Art of Star Wars: The High Republic. And I thought, oh, good. I'm so glad they're doing one of those. This is great. And then I had to read the email to actually see that, no, they're not doing it. You're doing it if you want to do it, because someone needs to write this book. They're just saying, hey, we have all this art. Who could drive this? Who could write this story? So I've just been, tremendously lucky, I think, in getting offered a lot of really cool projects that pair so well with my skill set. But a lot of that is also knowing a lot of the folks who are, driving some of those decisions, and being very lucky to get, my name put into that particular goblet of fire. I'm mixing all the fandoms today. The Vulcan Mind.
I love it.
Fantastic.
Like it's all just coming together.
That's okay. I referenced Lord of the Rings earlier, so we're all good.
We're all good. We welcome all the references.
Absolutely. The more the merrier.
Yes. But I will say, aside from 100 Objects, Skywalker was, they're all kind of really personal to me in different ways. Skywalker was really personal because, when I came onto that project, it was just this idea of, hey, the Skywalker saga's done. So how do we celebrate the family? And, how could we write this book? And immediately I felt like, let me get in there and pretend like this family is real and just write this entirely from that perspective. And, as if they're like the royals equivalent, but in the Star Wars galaxy. So, that felt very personal because, and because it's my first book. It's my first Star Wars book. And so it's like that first child syndrome where
It's
you're
my
like,
baby.
always be my favorite for those reasons. Better what?
Yeah, fair enough. I can see that.
But then, Art of was another really interesting experience. And I'm glossing over a couple other books here, no shade to them. Love Year by Year. Year by Year was a different beast because it was an update to an existing book. So it was very much, here's the format that's already been laid out, make sure you're covering all of the newest events, but, not a super heavy lift because all of the great folks who'd come before me had, done that part of the work of how do we even do this? How do we approach this? How do we design this? All laid out for me. So much simpler process. But then Art of was really interesting because, of course, there's been an Art of series for a number of years. In the recent iteration through Abrams specifically, there's been an Art of series since Force Awakens. And because this was part of that kind of collection, I was looking at what came before and then really trying to figure out, okay, how do we make a publishing initiative, a publishing led initiative like the High Republic fit into this space and still, make good sense with all of these productions that are really following, a very specific format of pre-production, production, post-production, within the storytelling. I don't know if I even answered your question.
Oh, you
Oh,
did.
you did very much so. And I love it because I can see why you have to put a bit of yourself into everything you do, because if you don't, you're not going to enjoy it. It's not going to be fun. And especially because of something Star Wars related, it's something you appreciate, and I can see why you'd have certain levels of attachment or involvement to each different project that you do. But it's nice to know that there are ones like, even with this, there are interviews that we do. I love every episode that we've put out. I have attachment to everything that I've done, but there are a couple where I was, the 12-year-old kid sitting here going, hi, thanks for talking to me. This is cool. Sam Witwer. Anyway, Sam came on and I had to like shut off my camera for a couple seconds just so that I could compose myself. I was completely fanboying, off screen, like, it's okay. You can talk to him. It'll be all right.
You produce a lot of people to Jelly, so understandable.
Yeah.
You and Sam Witwer, me and Will Wheaton,
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Yeah, we had such a good time with him.
If we ever get Felicia Day on, I might. But,
Right. Oh, no. If we get Felicia Day on, I'll just be like, nah, I have forgotten how to talk.
Yeah. It's going to happen. It's going to be a thing.
It will be.
So
you do put so much of yourself, I think, into your work if you're passionate about it, if it's something that you really care about too on that personal level. And I think with Skywalker in particular too, because it was my first book and because I felt like I had to rewrite the emails to that editor so many times because they were just all in caps. And I was like, he's going to think I'm screaming at him, but I'm just really excited and I need him to know. And then I was like, okay, calm down. And I think by the final, third revision of this email, it was like one word was in all caps. And I think it was like, I would absolutely love to do that. Really jazzed about it. But, I feel like when I was writing that book, I know when I was writing that book that I had the feeling that this could be the only chance I ever get to do one of these. There's never a guarantee that it's going to work, that they're going to like it, that it's going to do well, that you're ever going to get this shot again. So I thought, okay, let's make it count. And I just put, everything I could into that book during that process, with the idea that, I hope I get to do more of these. I hope I get to write other books. But if this is the only book I ever get to write in this space, I'm going to make it count.
Excellent.
Real quick, do you know when your Star Wars 100 Objects is coming out?
I'm going to say it's April 2023.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like Amazon's saying April 4th, so...
That sounds right.
Okay.
She's like, yes, go with that. That's the one. We'll go with that. That sounds good.
Yes. I know it's right around Celebration Europe. My brain currently is like, just get to the end of 2022. I know that, but it's like my brain can only function till January 1st at this point. It's like, that's a 2023 problem, Nick. I don't know. It'll come out sometime.
That's 2023 Kristin's problem.
Yeah,
Exactly,
I keep trying. My brain keeps trying to check out of 2022. I completely understand.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I believe April 4th is correct. If that is a Tuesday.
Maybe. Could be. Possibly.
So we have talked a lot of Star Wars and a lot of work. And on a completely non-work related note, we are all pet people here. And I saw online that you have a cat named Hector Smidget, which I absolutely love his name. That is fantastic.
That's fantastic.
I have two cats. I have Nymeria Patrice and I have Ernest Fitzgerald. So I love crazy names for cats. So could you tell us where his amazingly amusing name came from?
Oh, I love this question because I love a chance to talk about cats and especially my cat. I'm actually going to switch. That was a loud noise on my computer. I'm going to switch mugs for a second because this is Hector Smidget's mug.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, how cool is that?
The cutest face.
This was a lovely gift from a friend a few years back and just so happens to remind me to hydrate during the workday and just throughout the day when you're at your desk and maybe forgetting important things like hydration. Yeah, so Hector Smidget is my ginger tabby. He is 13 and I've had him since he was 8 weeks old. So he and I have been through a very, long. I've had him for a long time. I have flown him cross country now 5 different times on 5 different occasions as my carry-on bag. He's lived every place I've ever lived on my own, as an adult person. And he's just my pride and joy. I love him. And we're all pet people, so you know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So he has a wonderful personality too. I think he's hyper vocal, which for some people would be really annoying. And honestly, at 3 a.m, it sure is. But the rest of the time, it's kind of adorable. And he also has like this little mustache that you can kind of.
That's cute. Yeah.
Like a very expressive looking face, and then coupled with his mouth always being open and always shouting at me about things. He's got a very big personality. But to answer your question, his name actually comes from when I got him from the shelter. He was called Smidget already, but they didn't spell it the same way I spell it. And I thought it was like a cute name because he was just like a little smidge of a thing. Like he was 8 weeks old, so like he could fit in the palm of your hand. He was so fuzzy, like a little peach. And so I thought Smidget is a good name, but he's like a smidge of a cat. So we'll put a D in there. He's like a smidgen. And then one of my friends said, nah, Smidget's a dumb name. I'm not going to call him that. I'm going to call him Hector. And I was like, all right. And then after a little while, like that really started to stick. And then I had another friend who was like, nah, he looks like a Chuck. Looks like Chuck. And I was like, all right, I don't know about that. But eventually I thought Charles Hector Smidget just sounded like very regal and very refined, and that it made sense.
Love it.
It just makes sense that to me, the animals do have like 2 names. We have 2 names. Why wouldn't they have 2 names? But it's great because I'll see like various amalgamations on his like vet charts sometimes where they'll be like, Smidget Baver. Do we have Smidget Baver out here? Or he'll come in as like Hector Baver. And I'm just like, all of the variations are good. But what happens is because he has so many names, sometimes people think I have like 4 cats over here. But it's just the one. It's just sweet Hector Smidget.
It's just his extra personalities.
It's just, it's him and his very extra personalities, and he's very food oriented. He's constantly demanding to be fed, which is kind of hysterical because when I first got him, I had never had a cat before, so I was told like, oh, just keep the dish full. And then he got really large and because he was just like overeating all the time, and we had to put him on a little diet. But it's funny now because if I leave town and he's home alone, someone has to come in after him. Like the directions for this cat are just outrageous because it'll be like, please come in twice a day. If you put all the food out at once, he'll just eat it all at once and then get sick. Like he's not about that life. He needs a very specific regimen.
He has no control.
He's extremely high maintenance in that way, but but he is a delight. Please tell me about your animals now.
Oh my goodness. So I have a pit bull. She's a pit bull chocolate lab mix. Her name is Zoe Jane. So she's named after Firefly characters. Mm-hmm. She's fantastic, and she's got the most soulful polar bear looking eyes. Wow. And yeah, there's like 1 brain cell behind them. Which
not much, huh?
It's a pit bull thing.
Yeah,
she's gotten better.
Bouncing around in there and doing good. It's fine.
Right. It's gotten better. I feel like it's actually there 90% of the time now. She's 7, so she's actually finally like hit adult dog because pit bulls have this extended adolescence.
Yeah, I don't know if ours is going to make it that long.
Poor Mia might kill herself before then. And then I have 2 cats. I have Nymeria Patrice. She is a solid black house panther.
Oh,
and so she's Nymeria after the dire wolf from Game of Thrones, and Patrice after the character from How I Met Your Mother. Yes, because she was when she was in heat and she would howl, and I'm like, nobody asked you, Patrice, and it stuck.
Fantastic, yeah.
And then I have a tuxedo cat named Ernest Fitzgerald, so he's named after F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway, because his mom and 4 of his siblings are polydactyls.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
not, but he was the only true tuxedo. Like his brother that has the polydactyl is a tuxedo, but he's a tuxedo tabby. And I'm like, but I want the solid tuxedo, but he's got paws that are this big. And I'm like, you should have extra toes. You just have these giant meaty feet. But he's my little dork. I love him. He is a very, very vocal cat and very needy. But then he will sit in our hallway, and we refer to it as the Al Bundy, because he sits with his back feet out and his paw across his belly. And I'm like, if you had pants, you would have your paw in your waistband.
Right down there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, checking it out.
We are hitting all the fandoms today. Like,
Oh yeah.
we're just
It's-
checking those boxes. Firefly, How I Met Your Mother.
I'm gonna get Stargate in there somewhere.
Yes.
We're working on it. It's coming.
Galactica, like, come on, we got to do it now.
So I have 2 cats. We have a black, pure black. His name is Vader. And he's named Vader because he's all black with a big white box on his chest, and he's a bit of a butthead. And everything that you described your guys' cats as, Vader is very vocal. We say that he meow barks at me till I come and pay attention to him. So he's my cat dog. He'll bark at me with like meow bark until I come say hello to him. And about 3:00 in the morning, he's out doing something with a stuffed animal. We're not going to talk about what, but he's doing something with it. And then we have another cat. His name is Seven. Because we were going to name him Indy for a little bit. We wanted to call him Henry, but we already had a dog named Hank years ago, and that was too close. But we wanted to call him Henry because Indiana Jones. I'm a huge Harrison Ford fan, which is also why my middle son's middle name is Harrison. But we ended up calling him Seven because he is polydactyl, and he has these massive mittens on his front. He has 7 toes and 8 claws on each of the front of his hands. And so, because he was a mutant, they were like, we're going to call him Beast or Hank, or Henry, because that's Beast's name.
But
we came down to 7. So.
He is such a marshmallow of a cat, though.
Yeah, he's very cute.
And he's fluffy and snuggly, and you just want to.
He's a long hair. Yeah, he just wants to. He's very cuddly until he's not, and he lets you know when he's ready to not be cuddly.
Until he drops dead birds at people's feet.
Yeah, there's a whole story about my neighbor I got to tell you about sometime. But and then we have 2 dogs. We have Mia. She's a 1.5-year-old pit bull with half a brain cell, because I think they get the full brain cell at 2 years old. It's a good thing that she is as sweet as she is. It really is. You put down them fingers. I don't want to see those.
4. They don't get the full brain cell until they're 4.
She is quite possibly the dumbest and sweetest dog I have ever met in my entire life. All she wants is love. It doesn't matter who's giving it. But my son also has a pit bull, and when those 2 dogs run side by side, I swear they're sharing a brain cell, just passing it back and forth between the 2 of them. Like, okay, it's your turn to breathe. No, it's your turn to breathe. And that's how they keep going. And then I also have a 3-year-old corgi. Her name is Toast. Her full legal name is Madame von Toaster Strudelbutt, because her rear end does look like a loaf of bread. So
It does. It's
very
the
much so.
perfect,
Yes.
I love
Yeah.
it.
And she's like the beautiful toasted marshmallowy color, and
When she gets excited and the whole back end just starts wiggling, it's pretty.
she
fun,
has a little stubby tail.
Yeah, she's got about a 2.5-inch vertical, because those legs, yeah, there's just not much to them.
I haven't spent too much time with your pets. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like your pets more than I like your kids.
I'm fair with that.
And
Yeah.
I am currently petless.
Sad.
Oh,
Our last cat we had was Cat Cinco. It was cat 5 because it was the 5th cat my parents have ever had.
nice.
So
He
great.
was a white Turkish fan, and so his fur was like, he was a long hair, felt like rabbit's fur type of thing. So
Yeah. Wait, Nick, you said his name was Sadie Cinco?
yes,
Was the cat before that Sadie Quattro?
no, it was Mulligan.
Okay. You're like, it's the 5th cat. I was like, oh no, are they all Sadie?
That would
would
be funny though.
No, it was not Sadie. It was CAT.
Uh,
But it sounds Spanish,
I see. Okay. I like it.
Nice.
So, as a successful writer that does what you love, what is a piece of advice that you would give to people who either want to be a writer or those that are in the media that want to write better questions?
Ooh.
Or
So-
what advice do you have for us to ask better questions? You know, either way, you can go wherever you want with it.
No, your questions are great.
Aw,
Also, I love
payments in the mail.
questions, so thank you. So I think it's kind of a two-parter of advice, because writing and asking questions aren't necessarily the same muscle, I think. So my advice to ask better questions is to worry less about the questions you're asking and listen more, because I often find the best questions that come out of an interview are not the ones I necessarily thought about beforehand and wrote down, but they are the follow-up questions that come just from listening to someone's answer and seeing the way their face lights up about one particular thing. And then, trying to kind of pull on that thread, even though you didn't know it was there when you were prepping. So you didn't have a question related to that. And sometimes, honestly, the best questions aren't questions at all, but are really just like, tell me about this thing, and letting the person, just go off whatever direction they want to go into. But in terms of writing, I think the best advice there is to not, nothing, if you want to be a writer, nothing is stopping you from being a writer. It's one of those very lucky things that, in terms of as a hobby or as a pursuit, it doesn't take a lot of money, to buy the equipment for it. Really, all you need is a pad of paper and a pencil or a pen. It helps me personally if I also have a computer, because I tend to think faster than my hand will go. And so I had to learn how to type very early on, when I was about 8 or 9, because I was getting frustrated because I was trying to write my stories and I just couldn't get it down fast enough. And I was like, my brain is going at like 100 miles an hour and my hand is really not fast enough, but I can type a lot faster. So that helps. But, it's one of those things. I think if you want to be a writer, there's nothing to prevent you from being a writer. You just have to sit down and do it. And sometimes that is the hardest thing. Getting started can be really difficult. And sometimes the writing is the last part of writing that I actually want to do. I love the research. I love the prep. I love the interviews. I love talking to people. I love organizing all of my notes. And then I sit down and think, well, the last thing I have to do is actually write this thing. I guess we'll do that. And once you're in there, once you're in the zone, it can be, for me, one of the most, delightful experiences. But sometimes it's just that figuring out where to start. And actually, I will say just another piece of advice that I got from an editor was, to let your reporting drive the story. So, start with a really engaging lead, try and get people interested from the very first sentence. People are busy. They have a number of distractions. They've got other stuff going on. If you can't hook them in early, they might just put it down and walk away and go do something else. So you put a lot of thought into how you're starting those stories and how you're trying to engage people and why you're picking that sentence. And when I was a very young journalist, I would come up with things that I thought, yeah, this is smart. I like this. And then I would turn it into that editor and he would be like, what is this? No, you're writing out of your head. This isn't based on anything. Tell me a story, paint me a picture with the reporting that you've done. What have you actually learned that's really fascinating that will get me fascinated and interested in continuing to read this? And then go back to my notes and find, one interesting thing or something that, as the person was telling me the story, put a picture in my head, or just trying to paint a picture with words of what I was seeing as a reporter, out on assignment, and start from there instead of just like, oh, I'm so clever. Look at this turn of phrase.
Nice.
Well, Kristin, I personally have to get going. So I really enjoyed talking with you. And
Somebody's going to go see Avatar.
Oh,
what?
all right.
Sorry.
It's a good reason to leave.
Be
It
gone with you.
and it's a 3D too. So
Oh, all right.
The only way to watch any Avatar is in 3D.
yeah.
There you
So
go.
I really
Have fun, Nick.
appreciated
We
this
expect
time
a full
with you.
report later.
All right.
Yes. No, thank you so much, Nick.
Yep. Take care. Bye.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Since 1982, Vital Signs and Graphics has been helping professionals with all their image, logo, and design needs. Perhaps you're looking for signs and banners, truck and trailer lettering, business cards, brochures, or other image and marketing aids. Vital Signs and Graphics in-house design studio has you covered. From logos to apparel, start to finish, Vital Signs and Graphics has everything you need to look and feel professional. Call Rick at 231-652-3300. He'll get you noticed.
Welcome back to the FSF Popcast.
All right, now we can have fun now that Nick is gone.
Right. Yes. Haha.
All right, so Kristen, we have a large Facebook group and that follows us. It's about 208,000 members currently, so they're growing every day. We also put it out to our Twitter followers as well. That's not such a big group, but we're getting there. We're growing. But we asked them if they had any questions specifically for you about either your work or you personally or whatever. And so here are 2 questions we have from you that we selected out of the bunch.
Okay.
The first one is from our new friends over at Across the Stars podcast. I had the fortune of being on their show. They're a lot of fun, talking about some cool Star Wars stuff with them. But they would like to ask, if you could have any character write an article for your website, who would it be and what would you hope the article to be about?
That is a surprisingly tough question. So I'm going to go with my knee-jerk reaction.
All right.
And that is a character called Ril Dyro. She is a reporter in the High Republic. She has a droid and a cybernetic enhancement that helps her to capture all of the information. So I think she would do a really well-reported article for my website.
Perfect.
And she would absolutely be on the front lines of some breaking news stories. So it would be, wherever she is in the galaxy, I trust that she would come up with some really amazing coverage. In the books, she famously covers the destruction of the Republic Fair on Valo in the High Republic series.
All
so
right.
I suspect she might write something about that. But you know what? She's been around. She's probably written some other articles. So, whatever she pitches to me is probably the article I'm going to agree to.
All right, cool. I like that answer. All right, now the other one comes from our good friend Anna. Her and her partner Sam run another podcast called Growing Up Skywalker, which is a chronological review of all things Star Wars. It's kind of one of those neat shows where he's been around Star Wars all his life. She is brand new to the Star Wars universe and seeing everything for the first time.
It's so cool.
It's such a cool one. And they come on every month. We have a Star Wars RPG that we play. And Sam is one of our characters. He comes on and he does that. And Sam and Anna have both been on our show quite a few times. We love having them involved with our podcast. But because she has this perspective of being a new fan, she has some really cool questions. And I really like this one she wanted to ask you. Has the experience of being a woman who loves Star Wars changed over time?
I think the experience has changed a little bit in terms of there are more female characters now, to choose from, in terms of if you're a person who watches it and it looks for a representation of yourself and a reflection of yourself. There are a lot of really strong and amazing characters for that. But what's interesting is when I was a kid, I loved Leia, but Leia was not my favorite character. Leia was not the character that I actually saw myself most in. It was Han Solo. Mm-hmm. And so I've never really judged it very much based on kind of those standard gender lines.
Sure.
And it's another thing that I've thought a lot about in terms of, when my sister and I were kids, we had a lot of action figures that at the time would have been marketed as boy toys,
Mm-hmm.
toys in the boy aisle, and we had a lot of toys that were marketed as girl toys. But our parents were just, I think, wonderful feminists who didn't care about any of that, and were very supportive of just, you love whatever you love and whatever you're interested in. Here you go. So we had He-Man next to our strawberry shortcakes, and we had our Star Wars action figures, and we had our giant 1-to-1 baby doll type toys, and we just had just everything.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, for me personally, clearly I am not a woman, but I am raising
Shock.
one. And I think it's awesome that now I have the opportunity because, and no offense to Princess Leia, but in the original trilogy, she's kind of overlooked as a main character. She's there, but and you see parts of her personality where you're like, man, she could be really awesome.
Mhm.
And I think that that's given more credence in the sequel trilogy, to be honest with you, about how important she was to the original trilogy. But I love the fact that through the prequel trilogy, the animated series, a lot of the new stuff that we have coming out, there are so many more characters where I can point them to my daughter and go, look, here's some really cool Star Wars characters that you can look at, and maybe these people will be inspiration to you, like Han Solo and Luke Skywalker were for me when I was a kid. For me, as a father of a young woman, it's kind of a cool aspect for me to be able to look at that and see that there's opportunity for her to be able to say, oh man, Rey is so cool, because I think Rey is so cool.
Rey is so cool.
She is. Rey Skywalker, thank you. And I love the fact that there's Ahsoka and there's all these other awesome characters for young women to be able to look at and say, you know what, this is part of my Star Wars fandom now, and be able to use that, in growing up. I just think that's a cool reality that we have now that was not there, 20 some odd years ago, maybe.
Right.
I think it was there, but sometimes it was more subtext than text at times. Like, this is something I realized as I was going back and working on the Skywalker biography. It's like Leia becomes a general for the rebellion very early on, somewhere between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. So, she's already very much, in that position of power in the bunker on Hoth. But it's not something that's necessarily, comes out in the dialogue or is, discussed in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So there is definitely a lot more, I think, text over subtext now in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're also seeing a lot of just representation across the board, to allow more fans, no matter where you're coming from, to see yourself, which is so important. But another thing that I think is extremely important is the way modern contemporary storytelling, Star Wars and beyond Star Wars, addresses masculinity and some of those aspects of our culture and society. So that you can have someone like Din Djarin, who's super tough and you would not want to get into a fight with him because you'll probably lose, but he can also be just, so compassionate and loving with Grogu and, have that aspect of his.
Yeah, the caring father figure. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a lot more complex characters, I think, now versus, this character.
Agreed.
Although I will say, I think Star Wars has done that pretty well from the beginning, in terms of exploring that Han Solo wasn't just the rogue scoundrel. He also did have a heart, he did care about things. He does go on that arc and that journey and figure that out. But allowing, for more complexity and more representation across the board.
Very nice. Yeah.
So I've noticed that in the Star Wars fandom that there are a lot of differing opinions. I feel like a lot of the time we refer to Star Wars as being one of the most toxic fandoms, which is sad on some level. Like, I mean, on every level, it's sad. But growing up as a girl who liked Star Wars, it wasn't okay for a girl to want to be the main character. You have to go and be the side character. And even through that, there are people who love Jar Jar. There are people who don't love Jar Jar. There are people who thought that the Darth Jar Jar storyline should be a real thing. So I was wondering if you have a controversial Star Wars opinion, something that other people aren't going to agree with.
I don't think I really do. Because I think there's something to love in everything. For me, at least, like I always find not every Star Wars is going to be my personal favorite Star Wars, but because it can't be, like, they can't all be
right.
But there's always something that really resonates and that I love about it. And I think I also try to keep in mind that even if I have to rank the films, whatever my last ranked movie is, that day, because the ranking always changes.
Sure.
how I'm feeling, what I'm interested in, what I just watched. But whatever my last ranked movie is somebody's top ranked movie. Like for everybody, there is a different experience, and it's a very personal experience. So yeah, I don't think I really have a controversial opinion.
I think even though you're not having a controversial opinion and being like, no, because my least ranked movie might still be somebody's most ranked movie, is still somehow in the Star Wars fandom going to be a controversial opinion.
A little bit, yeah, probably.
Although I will say, like, it does make me sad to hear stories about people who, felt like they were, told, oh, you can't like this,
Mm-hmm.
when they were kids. And I don't, I was just never told that, or if I was lucky enough to be, brought up in such a way that I had like some kind of like armor against it, because I don't really remember that as part of my own experience. I do remember getting challenged to like trivia contests, which I thought were fun because I was good at it because I memorized a lot of Star Wars facts. And now in hindsight, I'm like, wait, was that somebody like kind of testing to see if I was a real fan? Maybe.
Oh yeah, you were getting gatekeeped.
Yeah, but at the same time, I was like, well, I'm glad it didn't register as that to me when I was a kid, because it just registered to me as, yeah, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to win this trivia contest.
Right.
I know all the things, like, whatever the kid equivalent is, hold my beer. I guess hold my root beer.
Right.
Hang on, like
I got this. Yeah, my husband dealt with it even with. I mean, we live 20 minutes away from where he grew up, and he's seen people that he went to high school with, that he went to school with, wearing Star Wars T-shirts, and he's like, "You tried to beat me up for that in school. You thought that Star Wars was the stupidest thing. You picked on me for being a nerd, and you're going to wear a Star Wars shirt and talk about taking your kids to Star Wars movies." He's like, "That's not fair." Like.
I think fandom in general, though, has become so much more mainstream in the last
Oh, sure.
20 years than ever before. And some of it was that people who grew up loving something continued to love it into adulthood and continued to get to collect it or, express that in some way, whether it's creating a podcast or having an amazing collection of lightsabers from Star Wars, or whatever that fandom is. And then to go to conventions and see other people who are exactly like you. Ooh, I like that there's a prop happening.
Lightsabers. I just can't reach the other ones.
Okay. Yeah. So it was like, are you about
I'd use the Force, but I can't get them to fly off the wall over here to me.
Fair. That's fair. Yeah.
I can just reach my daughter's lightsaber. I can't reach mine. They're up there.
That's okay. But yeah, it has become a lot more mainstream.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Well, that's a great answer, honestly, because I think that there's been so many positive changes when it comes to the fandom that have allowed for the expansion of other people to be involved and see the fun and join the fun. And there's always going to be there's always going to be that one guy who thinks he has to gatekeep everybody else because it's mine and I was here first or whatever that goes through their brain. I don't know. But I'm glad that there are people who have the outlook that you do, and that there's that appreciation for all things. And, there's room for everyone. That's the thing, I don't have to like everything about Star Wars that somebody else likes. Somebody else doesn't have to like all the things about Star Wars that I like. That's just the way it works. That's why they're called likes and dislikes.
Yeah.
And even just a little back, we do every Wednesday, we do a 5 at 5. There's 5 reasons to watch this or not watch this or whatever. And I ranked my top 5 Star Wars. That was the hardest episode that I think I've ever put together, because trying to, I knew what number 1 was. Past that, it was like, well, how do I feel about them today? Because,
Right.
And I think even in that, like, your number 3 was actually 2 of the movies.
It possibly was, yeah.
What I always run into when it's like, if I have to try and rank my favorite Star Wars movies, it's like Empire is usually pretty firmly number 1. And that doesn't really waver because it has so much like nostalgia tied into it too, where it's like, even as much as I love and appreciate the films that came after that, it's like that one is just always, top tier for me for very personal reasons. And then it's like, what I'd like to say is number 2 is all of the others, because I don't know after that. Like, it's hard to choose after that top.
Right. It's such a floating scale.
It is.
One day could be, Rogue One might be my number 2 movie. One day it might be The Last Jedi. it all depends, because there's so many things I like about this movie, and then I'm like, man, but that day I got done watching this movie, because that's pretty much what I do. I watch Star Wars all the time, and so that day I'm like, man, I just got done watching Return of the Jedi. So number 2 today is Return of the Jedi. So yeah.
Well, and
it
something
happens.
interesting that I find happens for me personally as a fan of Star Wars as well is, in the last 7 years or so, I got more into reading the books, and the books became more specifically tied to what's happening in other parts of Star Wars storytelling. So it does more expand on things, like Bloodline expands on Leia's story as you're getting into The Force Awakens and kind of filling some of those gaps, things like that. So what I find is sometimes what is inspiring a change in my personal list, and I think this is what you were saying too, Tim, is, I just read a book and I think, oh wow, this changes my outlook on this character, and then I rewatch something and it's a totally different experience. I cannot wait to rewatch Rogue One now that I've seen Andor. Because when I saw Rogue One the first time, I was not, personally the biggest Cassian fan. It wasn't that I disliked him; it was just that he didn't resonate as much as some of the other characters. I was like Team Bodhi for some reason, and I was like, let's get more Bodhi stories, And so then they announced Andor, and I thought, oh, okay, yeah, no, all right, we'll see what happens there. And then I love that show so much that now I need to go back and see how has it changed. When I look at Cassian, when I see what he's going through in that film, how does that impact my enjoyment of viewing it now? Because I know so much more about this character.
Yeah, that's the problem I'm having right now, because I'm in my umpteenth watch through of the Clone Wars, and I'm trying to get through that in time so that I can have that finished and be ready to and watch season 1 of the Bad Batch. So that on January 4th, when Bad Batch season 2 comes out, I'm ready to start fresh and be there. So yeah, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah, there's so much, and I enjoy it.
Where are you in your Clone Wars rewatch?
What's that?
Where are you in your Clone Wars rewatch?
I'm not going to make it. I'm only in season 2. So
okay. Yeah.
but I'm almost at the end of season 2. I could make it. I just don't need to sleep. So
there you go. Yeah.
Or be a parent, or do anything.
Don't eat. Well, do eat, I guess.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I could eat and watch the show at the same time.
Exactly.
That would be fine.
Exactly. Yeah. So. That is tough, but kudos to you for trying to do the massive rewatch. I'm so excited for Bad Batch season 2. I think there's probably, like, if you have to cut it, there's probably like some essential episodes to just refresh yourself on that you could like really.
I've already been going through and making a list. Okay, these are the ones I need to watch here. These are the ones I need to watch here, and then just power through Bad Batch season 1. If by the week of Christmas, if I haven't gotten down to where I need to get to, that's what I'm gonna do. I'll have essential episodes and season 1 of Bad Batch to push through. But past that, yeah,
totally,
that's the game plan anyway.
Yeah, I'm so excited for Bad Batch season 2.
Giggly excited.
I've just been shouting about Gungi a lot. It's that teaser trailer.
Yes.
Like, I'm just jazzed that season 1 and a lot of other Star Wars storytelling too. Like, there's all that overlap, where characters from other places show up over here. I had a really interesting kind of backwards introduction to Ahsoka, because I came in to watching Rebels before I watched the Clone Wars. So I watched Rebels. I was like, oh, everyone's so excited about this character. Okay. And then I had to like figure out why. And then of course, I went back and watched all Clone Wars, and now I've rewatched it, a number of times since then. But it was weird to kind of experience it from that like 180 of not already having that connection to that character, but seeing her and seeing how important she was and seeing other people respond to it. And I feel like with some people are going to have that for Gungi if they didn't watch the Clone Wars, or if they didn't see that arc, or maybe it just didn't resonate with them in that same way. Right. That now people are going insane because there he is, and he survived apparently. So it's like, yeah, yes. I was excited during the trailer. I was like, oh, he's back. Right. And I was just so glad they also confirmed it was him, because I was like, oh no, what if it's a different Wookiee, and everybody's getting excited about Gungi. But I think there was like something maybe in like the captioning or something that
I think
or maybe they just confirmed it at the.
I think the closed captioning, if you had that on,
Yeah.
I think that had it. So, all right, Kristin, you have made it this far through the process that is the FSF Popcast. What we have next for you is a quiz. Since, it's not a gatekeeping quiz, it's just a fun quiz. So, it's
Wait,
4 questions.
I did think of a controversial Star Wars opinion, though, through this conversation.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
My controversial Star Wars opinion is that Max Rebo only has 2 legs. I'm just gonna drop it on it.
Love it.
Love it.
I'm sitting near the maquette, which confirms this too. Like the maquette replica that has the 2 legs. And then, of course, if you had any of the Hasbro action figure renditions, you know that he popped out of his red Baljet organ and somehow had little legs under there and then his arms. But no, in my mind,
Little nubbies.
2 limbs.
There you go.
2 limbs
Fantastic.
bust.
Like it.
I love it. All right. So this is a 4-question quiz.
Okay.
All questions are multiple choice.
Yeah.
Okay. If you get 3 of the questions correct, we want to send you the book that Kathleen's going to hold up. It's called Custodians of the Cosmos. It's actually written by Nick's dad. He has donated some of those books for us to give to our guests, and it's where the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund comes from. So it's all about a young man who wanted to join something quite like Starfleet, but not Starfleet, litigious reasons. And he washed out and decided to rejoin as a custodian to boldly clean up after those who had boldly just went. So, but it's
All right.
Sorry, I opened up to a random page and it was where did it go? If they didn't get his stomach pumped soon, they'd be scrubbing grot worms off the ceiling.
So yeah, there's some fun there. But if you get 3 of the 4 questions correct, we'd like to send you that book, and it's a lot of fun. It's a good read.
Okay,
So.
I'm ready for this quiz.
All right, question number 1.
Hey, but what happens if she doesn't?
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. If you only get 2 of the questions correct, we take a picture of you. We make a meme out of you, and we put it in that Facebook group we referenced earlier. So.
I kind of hope it's wrong, but go on.
I'm getting there, Kathleen.
It's called
Mute You. It's called the Fun Sequence. It's our fun sequence. We make a fun meme out of you. We put you in the group.
I like it.
And so far, everybody who's had a meme, there's not been very many, but it's a nice elite club. So.
All right. Well, I'm happy with either way, either direction this goes. I'm excited.
All right. Fantastic. All right. So question number 1. What was Finn's stormtrooper number? Was it FN 2319? Was it FN 2781? Or was it FN 2187?
FN 2187.
Very good. I was kind of hoping to catch you with a 2319, but you got it. All right.
2319.
2319.
Question number 2. What is the name of General Grievous's flagship, which was not mentioned in the movie? A, the Invisible Hand. B, the Invisible Touch. Or C, the Invisible Cloak.
Ooh, I think it's A. Is it A?
The Invisible Hand. You are correct.
Ooh. All right. That was tricky. That was a good one.
Yay.
Yeah, with each invisible, I thought, but what if?
Right? Yeah.
But what if, and hear me out. All right. Question 3. At what age did Padme Amidala become queen? Was it 18, 14, or 13?
All right. I feel like I have a leg up on this because I wrote Skywalker Family at War.
You probably do.
I'm going to say 14.
14 is correct. And that gets you a book.
All right.
And now to totally put Tim's quiz to shame.
You shush.
Question number 4. Darth Tyrannus is also known as A, Qui-Gon Jinn, B, Mace Windu, or C, Count Dooku.
See Count Dooku.
Woo-hoo!
All right. Very good. I think the thing is that she knew all the answers to the quiz. At least she didn't Sam Witwer me where I had to could you just let us get the questions out?
Right.
Sam
were-
absolutely demolished it.
Oh my gosh.
He
It
didn't,
was borderline embarrassing.
I believe it.
and I knew that going into it because he has such a depth of Star Wars knowledge. I
Yes.
actually threw really hard questions at him, and he was like, "Yeah, it's this." I'm like, "Yeah, but we didn't even get a chance to give you the options. Could you give
Didn't
us?"
even get to the multiple choice.
I would not voluntarily get into a Star Wars trivia showdown with that man.
No,
He will demolish.
No.
Like, he knows all kinds of just like deep lore things that are the kind of things that my brain doesn't save and would need to cross reference if I were working on something that related to it. So yeah, no, but I'm just gonna get those four.
Very nicely done.
Oh, a little scary there.
Well done, you.
I'm worried.
Kristin, thank you so much for being on our show with us today. Where can our listeners go to find out more about you, your books, and your other content?
Yes. So you can find me most Thursdays on StarWars.com and the Star Wars YouTube channel as the host of This Week in Star Wars. I write a number of articles for StarWars.com as the associate editor. And I am also on Twitter, Instagram, and Hive at Kristin Baver. And next year, I'm currently on all of your bookshelves, wherever books are sold, with Skywalker Family at War, The Art of Star Wars, The High Republic, Star Wars Year by Year, and World of Reading, Galaxy of Creatures. I love to give that one a little nudge because it's a great early reader that I had the chance to work on. And next year, I will also be on your bookshelves with Star Wars Timelines and Star Wars Weird Objects. And I hope I didn't miss any of my book children.
We are definitely going to link StarWars.com and your socials so that people can find you, they can follow you, they can read your amazing content, and they can find out for sure when your new book is coming out.
Excellent.
There we go. We also want to remind everybody that subscribing is the single most important thing that you can do to ensure that we get more amazing guests like Kristin Baver here today to have this fun conversation and have funny moments for you to listen to. So please do hit the subscribe button that you see down at the bottom of the screen. That is going to be a big help to us. And be sure to go check out Kristin's work as well. You will not be disappointed. It's highly rated for a reason. Go check it out, kiddos. But if for whatever reason you are not happy with the content of our show today, please feel free to lodge a complaint with the head of our complaint department. That, of course, is Kristin's editor. But our problem is we have to figure out whether it's the book editor, the website editor, or the magazine editor. You see, we don't know which area the danger is coming from. Do they follow the rule of two with a master and an apprentice, or will they band together for honor and bring us the danger we fear? Either way, all you have to do is bring your complaint forms in duplicate. The editors will sort it out. Don't worry. They're really good at removing mistakes and making sure they can't be found. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, if you know what we mean. Yeah, that's not worrisome at all.
But ouch.
Kristin, thanks again. We do appreciate you coming on and sharing some time with us. On behalf of the rest of the hosts of the FSF Popcast, we want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to be a guest on a future episode, please contact us by means of Twitter or Instagram using the handle @FSFPopcast. Or go to www.fsfpopcast.com and click on the Contact Me link. Thanks again, and hope you enjoyed the episode.